Everything began long before Yandy and Rasheeda ever stepped into the same room, when whispers started floating through the love and hip-hop circles about an alleged secret affair tied to Mendeecees. Rumors that spread like wildfire and quickly turned into the season's most heated topic. At first, it was nothing more than a few vague comments, a couple of suspicious screenshots, and some late-night messages that fans dissected frame by frame. But as more people chimed in, the story gained weight and intensity, creating a pressure cooker long before any confrontation happened. Cast members talked behind the scenes. Producers sensed the growing tension. And social media amplified every hint, every sub-post, and every sly remark until the situation felt too big to ignore. Yandy, who has always tried to present herself as composed and focused, couldn't escape the noise she kept hearing, her name being tied to conversations that painted her in a corner, questioning her judgment, her relationship, and her loyalty. Rasheeda, on the other hand, found herself dragged into the rumor storm, not as a passive observer, but reportedly as someone who had heard something from someone who was close to someone, placing her in the middle of the narrative whether she liked it or not. The storyline spiraled as fans speculated. Was this real? Was this exaggerated? Was someone intentionally stirring the pot? All those layers of uncertainty built an emotional charge around both women, turning casual gossip into a ticking bomb. Even when neither of them addressed the drama directly at first, their silence only heightened the suspense, making everyone wonder when the truth or something close to it would finally be confronted. Producers reportedly kept an eye on every interaction, waiting for the perfect moment when all these swirling accusations would boil over. Because by now, it wasn't just a rumor, it had become a storyline too loud to avoid. By the time the cast gathered for the event, where the confrontation eventually exploded, both Yandy and Rasheeda were already carrying the weight of everything said, unsaid, leaked, hinted, and exaggerated. And it was clear the tension was not accidental, but the result of weeks of emotional buildup. This was the spark that lit the fire, a rumor born out of nowhere, fed by whispers, strengthened by screenshots, and pushed into a full-scale conflict that neither woman could walk away from. The moment Yandy walked into the room, the entire atmosphere shifted, as if someone had quietly tightened the air, pulling every pair of eyes toward her. Her entrance wasn't loud, but it carried a weight-steady footsteps, controlled breathing, and an expression that showed she already understood this moment was unavoidable. As she moved forward, the cameras caught every subtle detail. Her shoulders held firm, her jaw set with determination, her eyes scanning the room not for comfort but for the one person she knew she had to face. And then it happened to eye lock. Yandy and Rasheeda's gazes collided in a split second that felt like its own storm. Silent yet powerful enough to electrify the space between them. No words were spoken, but their faces said everything. Unresolved tension, unasked questions, and an undercurrent of betrayal that neither was willing to admit out loud. Rasheeda stood with a composed but icy posture, arms folded like a shield, chin lifted just enough to communicate. She wasn't backing down. Yandy, refusing to show even a hint of vulnerability, mirrored that energy with her own quiet strength, taking her position as if stepping onto a battlefield she didn't choose but was ready to confront. Around them, cast members exchanged anxious glances and whispered predictions, sensing that this wasn't just another scene, this was the moment everyone had been waiting for. Even the crew seemed to slow down, adjusting lights and cameras as if bracing for impact. When Yandy finally stopped just a few feet from Rasheeda, there was a microsecond of silence, the kind of pause that reality TV producers dream about, charged, heavy, and impossible to ignore. Their body language spoke louder than anything they could say. Yandy's narrowed stare, Rasheeda's tightened jaw, both women holding their ground like neither was willing to give the other the satisfaction of blinking first. The space between them pulsed with tension, the kind that makes everyone around instinctively take a step back. No yelling yet, no accusations, just a silent war forming in the way they stood, breathed, and tried to read each other. This wasn't simply an entrance. It was the opening scene of a confrontation that had been building for weeks. A collision of pride, suspicion, and unresolved emotions. And with that one eye lock, the drama that had lived in whispers suddenly became real. Setting the stage for an eruption, The scary part was that rumors about evidence often did more damage than the evidence itself, because imagination filled the gaps with the worst possibilities. For Yandy, the pressure was suffocating. She knew even a fabricated screenshot could be used against her publicly. For Rasheeda, the rumors gave her leverage, power, and momentum in the argument, regardless of whether the content was real. And as those whispers spread through the room like smoke, it became clear that this wasn't just a fight about words. Anymore, this had become a confrontation shaped by shadows of proof. The kind that can flip a narrative instantly and leave reputations hanging by a thread. As the whispers of leaked texts and alleged evidence continued to swirl, the confrontation spiraled into an emotional crescendo, with both Yandy and Rasheeda digging into every perceived slight, old grievance, and simmering resentment that had been quietly building for months. Yandy's voice cracked with a mix of controlled anger and raw emotion as she referenced past moments where trust had been stretched thin, accusing Rasheeda of framing situations to paint her in a negative light, of making sly comments during interviews, and of allowing rumors to fester unchecked. Rasheeda countered just as fiercely, her words sharp and precise, demanding that Yandy stop pretending to be the moral authority, reminding her of occasions where she had overstepped boundaries, spread opinions as facts, and created drama under the guise of concern. The room became a battlefield of memories, accusations, and confessions. Every statement loaded with the weight of previous seasons' conflicts. Friends tried desperately to intervene, suggesting calm, mediation, even stepping between the two women. But the emotional energy was magnetic, pulling everyone into the vortex of tension rather than deflecting it. Every glance, every sigh, and every subtle movement was analyzed, magnified, and dissected not only by those in the room, but by the invisible audience of fans online who were live tweeting and speculating in real time. The air felt thick, almost suffocating with the weight of unspoken truths and half-spoken accusations. A pressure so intense that even those watching closely could feel it physically. Yandy's frustration grew as she pointed out how the rumors and alleged leaks were affecting everyone around them, fracturing friendships, dividing families, and leaving reputations hanging by a thread. Rasheeda, maintaining a veneer of control, reminded her that perception and reality often diverged, that not every story was as simple as it seemed, and that sometimes the fire was fueled more by imagination than fact. Yet even as they exchanged these pointed lines, their voices rose and fell like a storm, each charged word striking like lightning, each pause crackling with anticipation, and the tension reached a point where it felt like the room could split in two. Every observer, friend, producer, and cast member alike knew that this wasn't a fleeting argument. It was a collision of unresolved history and present chaos, the kind that leaves long-lasting ripples. And as both women paused briefly to catch their breath, the silence was heavy with the unspoken acknowledgement that nothing would ever be the same after this emotional showdown, and that the next phase of the storm was already looming, waiting to erupt with even more intensity, just as the verbal barrage between Yandy and Rasheeda reached its peak. The door swung open and Mendeecees entered, instantly shifting the energy in the room and bringing an entirely new layer of tension. Every eye turned to him, every conversation paused, and even the air seemed heavier as the weight of expectation pressed down on everyone present. Yandy's heart pounded as she watched him step in, knowing that the unresolved rumors, the leaked texts, and the alleged videos all converged into this one moment of confrontation. Rasheeda, standing her ground with arms crossed and jaw tight, shot him a look that mixed accusation with silent challenge, daring him to take responsibility for the chaos his name had created. Mendeecees scanned the room, confusion and caution flickering across his face as he sensed the storm that had already been raging before he arrived. A friend quickly stepped forward, holding up a phone with a video clip. And suddenly the tension erupted into a new level of chaos. Yandy and Rasheeda both froze as the blurry yet undeniable footage began to play, confirming the rumors that had haunted the room and social media alike. Yandy's chest tightened, disbelief and emotional overload overtaking her usual composure, while Rasheeda's confident demeanor faltered, revealing cracks in her carefully maintained armor. Mendeecees, realizing the gravity of the situation, tried to explain, his voice tense and shaky, insisting that the events in the footage weren't what they seemed, that the night had circumstances only he fully understood. But Yandy, unable to hold back, cut him off sharply, her voice trembling with a mixture of hurt and rage, demanding that he should have told her first, not allowed the internet to deliver the blow. Rasheeda, equally charged, pointed out the complications of secrecy, the betrayals that had festered and the consequences that had now gone public. The room felt like a pressure cooker, the overlapping emotions of anger, disbelief, hurt, and defiance creating an almost tangible storm. Every movement, every tone of voice, every glance carried weight, while the background hum of social media notifications reminded them that the world outside was watching, analyzing, and waiting for every reaction. Mendeecees tried to mediate, to calm both women, but his presence only heightened the stakes, forcing all three to confront not just each other, but the public spectacle their private conflicts had become. The confrontation had escalated from verbal sparring to a complex emotional battlefield, where trust, reputation, and relationships hung by a thread, and the storm was far from over. Promising that the fallout would be explosive, unrelenting, and impossible to ignore. No sooner had the tension begun to settle than another wave hit the room when a new notification sounded across multiple phones at once, signaling that part 2 of the leaked video had surfaced online, this time clearer, more revealing, and impossible to ignore. The room froze instantly. Every eye locked on the screens as the blurry footage transformed into something disturbingly detailed, showing Mendeecees in prolonged, intimate contact with the woman at the center of the rumors. Yandy's breath caught in her throat, her hands shaking as she struggled to process the unfolding evidence, while Rasheeda's earlier composure cracked, revealing a flicker of concern and disbelief she hadn't allowed herself to show before. The social media storm outside mirrored the chaos inside. Hashtags trending within minutes, speculation running rampant, and fan theories multiplying by the second. Even the friends and producers in the room were stunned, whispering nervously about how quickly the clips had spread and the impact it would have on reputations, relationships, and alliances. Yandy's voice broke as she demanded answers, her emotions raw and unfiltered, tears threatening to spill, and the weight of betrayal pressing down like a physical force. Rasheeda attempted to calm her, but the words seemed hollow against the onslaught of visuals, messages, and assumptions cascading into the room from every device. Mendeecees, looking pale and anxious, tried to explain, insisting that context was missing, that the footage didn't tell the full story, but the damage had already begun. Perception was reality, and the world outside had already made its judgment. The overlapping reactions, the disbelief, the outrage. The defensive postures created a charged atmosphere that made it impossible for anyone to think clearly. The leaked clips weren't just evidence. They were fuel, igniting conversations, arguments, and speculation that would ripple across the season. Friends exchanged worried glances, sensing that the personal had become inescapably public, and that no mediation could erase the digital footprint now etched in social consciousness. Every glance, gesture, and whispered comment inside the room carried amplified weight, reflecting the high stakes of the moment. For Yandy, the clips confirmed her worst fears, leaving her emotionally exposed in front of the world. For Rasheeda, they tested her ability to remain calm while navigating the fallout. For Mendeecees, they forced an immediate reckoning with actions and consequences he hadn't fully anticipated. And as the room pulsed with tension, it became crystal clear. This confrontation had evolved far beyond private grievances or backstage drama. It was now a full-blown public spectacle, with reputations, friendships, and trust hanging in the balance. And the next move from any of them could ignite an even more explosive chapter in the unfolding saga. The moment the second clip settled into the collective consciousness of the room, a heavy, almost tangible wave of emotional fallout swept through everyone present. Yandy's composure crumbled as tears finally spilled freely. The weight of betrayal, humiliation, and disbelief pressing down like an unbearable storm. Every line she had delivered before the accusations, the demands for honesty. The restrained fury now seemed like prelude to this raw, unfiltered reaction, as if the reality of the leaks had stripped her words of any buffer. Rasheeda, who had managed to maintain a steely confidence through the previous rounds of confrontation, softened slightly, almost instinctively realizing the depth of the emotional damage being revealed. Yet her presence remained charged, a careful balance of caution and empowerment. Mendeecees stood in the center, visibly shaken. Guilt and frustration etched across his features, as he tried desperately to explain, clarify, and mitigate the chaos. But even his voice carried the faint tremor of someone struggling under scrutiny. The room was a chaotic mesh of emotion, friends whispering nervously, producers exchanging worried glances, and phones buzzing with notifications from an outside world already dissecting every detail. Yandy's anger now intermingled with heartbreak. The tears in her eyes mirrored the fury in her voice as she demanded accountability. The sense of betrayal stretching beyond Mendeecees alone to encompass the tangled web of secrecy, manipulation, and perceived deception that had built over time. Rasheeda attempted to mediate, her tone softer, more deliberate. But even as she tried to diffuse the tension, the emotional earthquake reverberating from Yandy's raw reaction made it impossible for the storm to settle. Each whispered rumor, each cryptic message, each alleged secret call now held the weight of explosive proof, threatening relationships and loyalties that had once seemed unshakable. The air was thick with unspoken truths and imagined consequences. As the friends and cast members who had tried to act as buffers realized their presence could do little to stem the rising tide of hurt and mistrust. Social media chatter mirrored the room's energy, a digital reflection of the chaos, speculating, judging, and escalating the emotional stakes with every passing minute. What had started as a confrontation between two women had transformed into a multi-layered, high-stakes crisis where trust had fractured. Alliances teetered, and the perception of reality was as volatile as the emotions now boiling over in front of everyone. And in the silence that followed the peak of this emotional eruption, one thing became painfully clear. The trust that had once seemed solid was now irreparably cracked. And the fallout would shape every interaction, every decision, and every relationship in the unfolding saga as the room began to catch its breath from the emotional hurricane. The reality of fractured alliances and public scrutiny set in, making every glance, whisper, and reaction feel magnified under the pressure of exposure. Friends and family exchanged uneasy looks, caught between loyalty and the undeniable chaos unraveling before them. Unsure whether to intervene, stay silent, or take sides, Yandy, still trembling from the emotional weight of the leaked footage, felt the sting of betrayal not only from Mendeecees' actions, but from the ripple effect it created in her social circle, where loyalties were being questioned and whispered alliances exposed. Rasheeda, standing her ground with calculated composure, tried to assert that perception wasn't always reality, that rumors could twist facts into narratives far from the truth. Yet even she couldn't fully ignore the growing tension that the leaks and accusations had unleashed. Meanwhile, social media became a relentless spectator, dissecting every word, every glance, every expression in real time, amplifying the drama exponentially. Hashtags trended, video clips were replayed, and fan debates erupted, dividing audiences into camps, each convinced they held the moral high ground. The pressure inside mirrored the chaos outside, creating a feedback loop where personal conflicts collided with public judgment, forcing everyone in the room to navigate not just the immediate, emotional storm, but also the relentless digital commentary shaping perceptions. Yandy's voice, though shaky, grew sharper, demanding answers, clarifications, and accountability, highlighting the way secrecy and half-truths had corrupted trust and destabilized relationships. Rasheeda, for all her attempts to mediate, now found herself forced to confront the fragility of alliances she had assumed were unshakable, realizing that even measured words could be weaponized in the court of public opinion. Mendeecees, positioned at the epicenter, wrestled with the knowledge that private actions had become public ammunition, leaving him scrambling to maintain control while also defending those he cared for from the unyielding scrutiny outside. Each subtle movement, each hesitation carried potential consequences, and even minor comments could be misinterpreted, intensifying the stakes. The friends in the room, initially attempting to soothe the tension, quickly realized that nothing could mitigate the combined force of raw emotions, lingering mistrust, and the relentless social media storm that was now dictating the narrative in real time. As whispers of further leaks and private conversations circulated, it became chillingly clear that every decision, every word, and every action would be amplified, dissected, and debated, leaving no room for privacy, no room for error, and no certainty that any of the relationships involved would remain intact. The room pulsed with anticipation and unease, signaling that the fallout had only begun and that the web of trust, loyalty, and reputation would be tested in ways that none of them could have anticipated. With emotions still raw, the room remained charged as the consequences of the leaked videos, accusations, and confrontations began to fully settle, leaving everyone present grappling with the reality that nothing would ever be the same. Yandy, heart pounding and tears streaking her face, struggled to process the combination of betrayal, public exposure, and fractured trust. Her mind racing with questions about who could be believed and whether relationships she had relied on would ever recover. Rasheeda, still composed outwardly, but visibly affected beneath the surface, understood that even her attempts at reason and mediation had only fueled the chaos, leaving her to navigate the delicate balance of defending herself while attempting to calm a storm that refused to abate. Mendeecees, caught in the center of the emotional and social maelstrom, realized that private matters had become public spectacle, and that every word, every gesture, and every explanation would be scrutinized endlessly by both those in the room and the millions witnessing the fallout online. The friends and family surrounding them were paralyzed by uncertainty, unsure of how to intervene or whether doing so might worsen the situation, each reaction adding another layer of tension to an already volatile mix. Social media continued to erupt, with fans dissecting every clip, comment, and expression, creating an unrelenting wave of judgment, speculation, and debate that threatened to define public perception long before the truth could be clarified. Alliances had been tested, loyalties questioned, and reputations left hanging in a precarious balance. Each person acutely aware that the next move could either mitigate or exacerbate the fallout. In the midst of this chaos, subtle gestures, a flicker of an eye, a slight shift in posture, a whispered comment carried disproportionate weight, signaling intentions and alliances that were anything but clear. Even as the immediate confrontation paused, the tension lingered, electric and palpable, a reminder that the drama was far from over. Rumors of additional leaks, hidden messages, and private conversations promised that the next chapter would be even more explosive. Keeping everyone in a heightened state of anticipation, the room, though temporarily, still vibrated with the promise of future revelations, unresolved grievances, and ongoing conflicts, leaving every participant and observer acutely aware that the story had only begun to unfold. And with the world watching, questioning, and speculating, it was certain that the emotional, social, and reputational consequences of this night would echo through every relationship, every alliance, and every future interaction in the Love and Hip Hop Atlanta universe, setting the stage for the next shocking twist that no one would see coming. twist that no one would see coming.